many places in BC, many municipalities require multiple permits, applications spanning over different ministries and different processes, and it takes a long time. So this is apparently going to streamline the process and allow or eliminate the need for multiple applications. I think making it more efficient and cost effective is going to incentivize developers to build more homes, especially now with interest rates and supply chain issues. Developers need any incentive they can get, and I think this is a huge one.
Hi guys, Nelda Schulte here from neldaschulte.com in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And today is going to be a really fantastic show because there are a lot of investors who would like to invest in BC, but they don't know how to get going and they don't know what to invest in and they don't know how to invest in it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We've got a really excellent guest. Her name is Emily, and she is not only a realtor, she is a real estate investor. She owns 2 multifamily properties that are 46 units and 23 units respectively. She owns 2 single-family homes in Kelowna, BC. She owns 2 rental condos on Vancouver Island, 1 Airbnb. I'm not done yet. And she's currently subdividing and developing land in West Kelowna. So this is somebody who is a real majorly overachiever. She's not only that, she has a Bachelor of Science in Advertising, an interior design diploma, and she is a certified negotiation expert. But I'm still not done. Emily is a 2-time Olympic bronze medalist with the Canadian women's soccer team, and she's been indicted into the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame. So I think it's time to bring Emily on so that we can talk to her in person and find out how she did some of these great things that she did in real estate and enlighten all of us. So please help me welcome Emily, and here we go. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, thanks, Nelda. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that great intro.
Yeah, it's really great to have you here, Emily. So could you tell me you're very young. Do you mind if I ask you how you managed to acquire all of this property at such a young age in one of the most expensive places in Canada?
Yeah, well, I don't feel young these days, but thank you for saying that. Honestly, I have to attribute a lot of that to my husband. When we met almost 9 years ago, he was already pretty involved in real estate. He had worked overseas as a helicopter engineer and made some really good money, and had a mentor at a young age that just told him to buy real estate and keep on buying it. So when we first met, actually our first venture together was that 23-unit apartment building in Creston. And it kind of just developed from there. We were living overseas at the time together. So we were doing a lot of overseas investing. And then, we came back to Canada in 2020 during COVID and just have continued to build our portfolio since.
Do you still have overseas investments, Emily?
So overseas, meaning that we were living overseas, but we were investing in Canada. Yeah. So nothing overseas, no, just mostly properties. Well, only properties in BC currently.
Excellent. Okay, great. So tell me, you're a certified negotiation expert as well.
Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing that must come in handy really well with being a realtor and also in marriage.
I would say that it comes most handy in marriage. I think my husband was a little bit disappointed when I got that. He knew he was going to lose even more arguments than he already does.
I guess that's the key. Only one of you gets certified in negotiation and the other person is poor victim.
Yeah.
That's really great. And do you mind if I ask you how you managed to, you said your husband came up with a chunk of the cash, but after a certain point, we all ran out of cash. So do you mind if I ask how you managed to come up with the cash for the other properties? Because multifamilies are a significant amount. Property development is a significant dollar sign. Yeah. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, of course. So as mentioned, we had a pretty big chunk for a down payment on our 23-unit building in Creston, like I mentioned, in the Kootenay region. However, we did have to bring investors in a really short, 6-month timeline. Basically, our strategy was the building was in pretty rough shape, not terrible, but the units could all use an upgrade. And so, we got in there and have now renovated 18, fully renovated 18 of those 23 units.
Wow.
But we're able to refinance shortly after, within 2 years. we could refinance, and then we parlayed that money into that 46 unit building in Vernon. So that's how we got into the multifamily space. That 46 unit building was also a vendor take back. We had a partial vendor take back mortgage on that. Same strategy. As I mentioned, we were living overseas in Shanghai at the time. We moved home during COVID, lived in about a 300 square foot apartment in that building, and renovated 13 of the residential units ourselves. So 13 of the units are residential, the rest are commercial, and we renovated all of them over a 7-month period and were able to double the rents there.
So did you go in with a hammer and a chisel and do, like when you said you renovated them yourselves, or did you hire contractors?
We basically did everything. We had a plumber, like everything that we needed certifications for, we did, a plumber and electrician. But other than that, yeah, I pretty much laid most flooring in those units, did a lot of painting, replaced, redid the kitchens, bathrooms, basically did the whole thing ourselves. It was funny because it was during COVID, we really had literally nothing else to do. So it was a really good time for that. We basically just, spent all of our time doing these renovations. We were also managing the property at the time. We took over from the previous manager. Because we were living there, we figured we'll just manage it in the interim for the 7-month period before we get a new special manager. It was a really interesting experience. Lots of good stories. We actually became good friends with many of the tenants. Good friends, maybe not friends, but we had good relationships with them, and we would get knocks on the door at 10 p.m. Telling us there's things broken, and it was definitely, I would never do it again. It was quite the experience. Wouldn't do it again, but it definitely paid off in the long run, and we were able to, like I said, double every single rent in that building.
Wow. Well, that's quite the story. I'm just really impressed by how you managed to stay married throughout all that, because they call living in a house and renovating at the same time divorce dust.
Oh my gosh. It was going to be an either make or break situation. We were like, we're either not going to be we'll get over everything that ever comes our way in marriage, or this will be it. And luckily we survived it. Yeah. There were definitely moments where I wasn't sure, but we survived it. And like I said, we moved back during COVID. So we didn't have anything. We were living out of bags at the time. We had lived in Shanghai for the 3 years prior. So we moved back with our rescue dog, a couple of suitcases, went into quarantine right away for 2 weeks. We had an air mattress in this tiny apartment, and we were renovating the unit next door during those 2 weeks. So we had gotten all the materials and tools delivered beforehand. And then we ended up staying on that air mattress for the next month, and then finally moved out of the 300 square foot apartment into one that we had renovated about 3 months later. But
right.
I honestly don't know how we got through it.
Did you sleep on a real bed then? Did you buy yourself a real bed?
Yes, that was one of my requirements. I said, this will not work unless we buy a real bed. So 3 months later, we finally got one.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so difficult. Like my husband and I renovated our Calgary property when we were living in it. And that was nuts. I mean, and it's a suited space, but I can't imagine doing another 18 units on top of that 24/7 and managing all of those properties. Like that's just crazy.
Yeah.
It was
a lot. To be clear, we did 13 units in Vernon. The 18 units out of the 23 in Creston were done by someone else. We didn't do those. Yeah.
At that point, you're like,
Yeah.
We want to show how tough we are. We know it. Let's outsource here. Good for you.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to understand why you chose to invest in BC. I mean, you hear all kinds of things about. I mean, there are pros and cons of investing in every province. I think probably the biggest con that I hear about of investing in BC is, well, firstly, the daunting price tag. it's just so expensive to buy anything in BC. And then the next one is there's a transfer tax, land transfer tax that people from other provinces are just not used to paying, and that really kind of ups the price tag when you're already having to cough up what people consider a huge amount of money. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about transfer tax before we get into, I understand you've got a really good presentation giving us an overview of why investing in BC is a great idea. But can you tell us first about transfer tax?
Sure. Yeah. So BC transfer tax, 1% on the first 200,000, 2% on anything 200,000 up until 3 million, and then 3%, up until 2 million, and then 3% for anything over that 2 million. So it definitely adds money to the price tag and your closing costs. For me, it's just something that we've always had. So it's always something that I've been used to and just factored into our numbers. It's definitely, compared to Alberta, I can see the argument that it's, real estate is already so expensive in BC, plus that additional tax just makes it harder to cash flow and profit. However, we've been successful throughout it. Appreciation-wise, I think BC is probably one of the strongest markets in the country for appreciation if you're planning on holding on to properties long-term, which has always been our strategy. And we also, like I mentioned, love to add value to our properties. So we don't necessarily, so far, I think in the future we will buy new properties, but in the past we've bought properties that need work done to it, so we can add value that way, and that we've been able to be successful increasing our profit margins that way. Is
there an age cutoff that you won't buy a building that's any older than X amount of years old, or do you have that, or is that...
We don't personally have that. It's kind of funny where we've been talking lately about moving into kind of a newer build. Like I mentioned, we're planning on building a home in West Kelowna this upcoming year. Just because we just want more time for family. We had a little baby. He's 6 months old now, and hopefully planning to expand our family in the next few years. So there's obviously some pros and cons with buying older properties. The cons is that there's just more headaches, there's more maintenance, and problems arise even if you're not personally managing it. So our plan is to kind of move more into the kind of newer construction. But no, in the past there hasn't been an age that we've said no to.
Okay. So it has to be the right deal, the numbers have to work, and then you add value to it, and then it cash flows for you. You've been able to make the numbers work for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Okay, so should we get into why invest in BC? I'd love to see your presentation.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so here we go. So I'll just go through the summary quick. We'll just go through an overview of the real estate market in BC. I'll talk about some points about why to invest in BC, some of the advantages of investing in BC, the GDP and budget for 2023, some net migration numbers. I'll touch on the housing crisis, which I think everyone's aware of. New provincial government initiatives. So recently we just got a new premier in November, and then stats and forecasts. And then I'll go through some of the regional markets and some of the markets that I think have potential for investment wise.
This is excellent. Thank you. So let's hear about why BC.
Why BC? So to summarize, natural beauty. Obviously the photos speak for themselves. Strong economy. Diverse and growing economy. Technology, forestry, tourism is driving a lot of growth. Lots of job opportunities and stable foundation for investment opportunities. Mild weather, so we're probably not get as cold of weather as you guys get in Alberta and Ontario. Thankfully.
It's a balmy -13 today. What are you talking
about? my West Coast bones can't handle that cold. So top-notch educational institutions, a lot of cultural diversity. We have vibrant cities like Vancouver and Victoria, known for their cultural scenes, restaurants, thriving nightlife, although everyone from Toronto would probably argue that. High quality of life. So BC is consistently ranked as one of the best places to live in the world. Endless activities year round, great place for kids to grow up. Skiing, hiking, sailing, fishing, wineries, mountain biking, you name it. And then real estate investment, just in terms of the long play. People have been really successful.
So it seems to me that people who live in BC don't ever want to live anywhere else. Like that's the only place they want to live. And are you from BC, Emily? I'm
from BC. So I was born in Vancouver, grew up on Vancouver Island, and kind of left BC really early on. So as you mentioned, I played soccer for Canada. So as soon as I graduated high school, I basically went traveling to play soccer, went to university in the States, and then went to play professional soccer in Europe. So I've done a lot of traveling. I've lived in Europe, North America, Asia, traveled to over 60 countries. And after all of that, I have to say that BC is truly one of the most beautiful places on earth. So it was always a place that I was going to come back to. And that's why we've chosen to invest here as well.
That strong pull back to the mothership.
Yeah. And my mom yanking me back too.
Yes, and I think also family seems to be a big draw for most people, especially if you have a young family, you want your children to know your parents. So, and they can help out with all kinds of things too. So that kind of takes a load off to a certain degree.
It does, yeah. And it really is just a beautiful, wonderful place to grow up. Like there's something for everyone here, no matter if you have a family or you don't. And if you like the outdoor life, then BC is the place for you. There's a lot of investors that come. We get a lot of Albertans and a lot of Ontarians. Ontarians? Is that how you say that?
Whatever.
I think a lot of people come here to visit and then just end up staying here because they fall in love with it. It's really hard to leave once you move here. Yeah.
So lifestyle is a lot of reasons people like to move to Calgary, because we're close to the mountains and there's hiking and fishing. All the things that you talk about, minus about 20 degrees. With a lot more snow.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fair. I haven't spent a lot of time in Calgary, but I did go there for a wedding last year, and it is beautiful. It was a fall wedding, and the leaves and the colors were honestly stunning. And obviously Banff and all the surrounding mountains, beautiful.
Yep, absolutely is. So yes, okay. So we are looking now at the advantages of BC real estate, specifically. I have a little trouble with my mouth today. And I'm seeing here, the economy and the population growth are really big, and Canada is going to be experiencing a huge flux of immigration within the next couple of years if they actually come through. And we're seeing low vacancy rates across Canada, but I think in the bigger centers like Toronto and Vancouver, and there's certainly a much more pressing housing shortage than there is anywhere else. Tourism, of course, is always huge in BC, and diverse economy is huge. Calgary, Alberta actually is pretty much, we're still oil centered. We're trying to diversify, but we're not quite there yet. We're getting there though, slowly by little, but Vancouver and BC has actually gotten there already. They're already doing really well with a diverse economy. So I can see why people want to invest in BC, and why people who have been there want to stay there and buy more properties there and encourage more people to come and move there and or invest there.
Yeah, like you said, tourism, the technology sector is growing massively in Vancouver. So a lot of people who maybe want to work in Canada are coming up from the US. Immigration, we've had 100,000 last year, and I think that's the average projections for the coming years. So it's growing, and like you mentioned, there is a housing crisis there, like many cities across Canada, but Vancouver especially. There's just so much demand and little supply currently. On the bright side, BC is expected to have over 1 million job openings between 2022 and 2032. So there will be more opportunities for that. But definitely there needs to be some plans in place, which I will touch on with the new government. They've announced some new initiatives to kind of help that housing crisis in BC as well.
That's great. Love to hear about them.
Cool. So, yeah, I'll just touch quickly on real estate investment strategies in BC. We can dive more into this as we go on, but long-term rentals. So, yeah, like I mentioned, cash flowing properties are harder to find in the major cities like Victoria and Vancouver and Kelowna. But if you're planning on holding the property for 5 years or more, you're historically gonna see some serious appreciation. Short rentals are really good option, an opportunity, and one we've taken advantage of here in Kelowna. That just, it allows you to make up to 4 times more than you can as the long-term rental, especially over those high season months. From June to September here in Kelowna, we're seeing massive tourism. We actually, as an aside, our primary residence, we bought, it's a 4-bedroom house with a pool. So we closed on that June of 2021. It had actually already been set up as an Airbnb property. So we negotiated into the deal that we wanted everything furnished. So we closed, I think it was June 21st we closed. We listed it on Airbnb June 23rd, like 2 days later. And we were renting that out for a max of $1,800 a night on the weekend.
Oh, that's great. So the whole house, so you said it's your primary residence. You live there and you rent it out as an Airbnb?
It is our primary residence because there are rules around that in Kelowna. Unless it's a short-term zoned building, it has to be your primary residence. People find ways and loopholes around that, but legally it has to be your primary residence. So instead of moving into the house, we just Airbnb'd it for the summer until September, made almost $100,000 that summer, and then moved in mid-September. Yeah.
Oh,
so there's a lot of opportunity for that in Kelowna. There's always going to be people visiting here for weddings and wineries and events, and it's just a beautiful lake city in the summer. So there's potential there for that short-term space.
So as somebody who's managed properties and recognizes all the complexities of having a team in place to keep things up and running, how difficult or easy was it for you to get a team in place to run your Airbnb property, or did you and your husband do the cleaning and the stocking and everything yourselves?
We did not. We could have, and we would have made more money, but I was like 8 months pregnant at the time, and he was working away. He's a mortgage broker now, but at the time he was still working in helicopters, and so he was doing a touring job over the summer fighting forest fires, 2 weeks on, 2 off. So we got a professional management company, which there are a lot in Kelowna because the industry is so popular. You will see a 25 to 30% expense for professional Airbnb management.
That's a lot. Wow.
It is a lot. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot.
Short-term rental is much harder, though. It's much more complex to manage it. It has to kind of run like clockwork, like a hotel.
Yeah, it is. It's a very high turnover. Obviously, you always have to be on call. There's things that happen, and over summer, it's booming. So if you want to take that on, you can obviously make a lot more money. For us at the time, we knew we were going to be successful as it was, and we just didn't have the capacity to take it on ourselves. But that being said, many people do that.
Good stuff.
And then so investing in smaller upcoming markets. So I'll touch on some of my favorite markets in the province later on. And then commercial properties we mentioned as well, and we can dive a little bit more into that. I'll quickly go over the budget. So budget this upcoming year focuses on improving health and mental care. So homelessness and the mental health is an issue in the province in some places, more so than others. Focusing on creating more affordable housing, growing a clean economy, delivering more help with costs to families and those affected by global inflation. So $1 billion funding to expand mental health services and addiction. So we're expected to grow 0.4% in 2023 with the economic slowdown. So GDP growth has slowed down significantly. but then it's set to increase to over 2% growth in 2024. So
yeah, and Calgary's got you beat on that one. I think Calgary, Alberta. I always talk about Calgary. Alberta, I think, is expecting 0.6% growth in 2023. So, but
yeah,
we've always been at the bottom of the spectrum. So now it's nice for us to rise to the top. It's taken.
You guys are booming right now.
Yes, but
you are, yeah.
Taken a very long time. Alberta was right at the bottom of the economy for many years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're the only province that has sustained growth this year. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of a boom and bust kind of place here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
whereas
enjoy it.
It's always steadily up, right? It never really drops.
Yeah.
That much.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And there's so many benefits to living there as well. A lot of people, like I mentioned, come from Calgary to Kelowna, especially over the summer. You'll see like half the license plates are Alberta license plates. So we say we're kind of Albertan in that sense. So you guys have us beat, but Ontario is Ontarians expecting a drop of 0.1%, it looks like, this next year. So yeah, everyone obviously is slowing down, but my thought is that it will rebound in 2024.
Yeah.
So our population, 5 million, net migration is over 100,000 per year. Actually, 29% of the population of BC are immigrants. So a lot of people are coming in from other provinces and other countries. Vancouver has been ranked one of the most desirable cities in the world. So people want to live here. And we don't, at this point, have the housing required to meet those needs. We're projected to grow more than 1 million people over the next 10 years. Just breaking down the budget, 4.2 billion in operating and capital funding over the fiscal plan is to address housing affordability. 1.3 billion will go to building BC and housing programs, 575 million to student housing. So they're putting that money into housing close to all the major universities. 732 million to reduce homelessness, and then 394 million to help buy lands for thousands of homes near transit. So it's good to see, like, there's obviously an issue, but it's good to see initiatives moving in the right direction, and hopefully we'll have a positive impact on those issues. I think it's a problem that will take years to kind of solve, but it looks like we're moving in the right direction.
So student housing was something that was identified by Hart Togman when I spoke to him last week as something that is a really great investment strategy for investors all across Canada. Is that something that you would consider doing, or that you would recommend to people in BC?
Definitely. I've actually had a few clients. So here in Kelowna, there's a UBCO campus, so a satellite campus of UBC in Vancouver. And in 2024, they're planning on building that. The original campus now is out by the airport. 2024, they're planning on building another campus downtown Kelowna. So there's a lot of new buildings coming up in that area, a lot of wood frame, kind of more affordable condos being put up. I just had a few clients recently buy in one of those developments in that area. And so they're really focusing on downtown student rentals. And I think it's a really great option for people wanting to invest closer to universities, because there's always going to be students there. And especially for those new build properties, to get in early, I think it's just going to continue to grow.
Yeah, and I think with most students, parents are funding their rent, and parents want them to live someplace nice and safe, not top of the line, but a nice, safe place.
Yeah.
And so they're willing to pay $1,000 a room or $1,200 or whatever the going rate is to have their kids in a nice place. So that's not usually the problem, as people can't afford the rent. That's not a big deal. I know people who own student rentals, and they haven't really had a lot of problems. They set house rules. They're kind of like den mothers and fathers. And they do monthly check-ins, and they do Halloween parties and all kinds of stuff, because a lot of their students are from overseas. So it's a way for them to kind of give them a positive feeling about Canada, and to include them in on our community and our Canadian community. So they've had positive experiences. They've gotten good profits from it, and they enjoyed the process. It was good for them. But I'm wondering if there are rental companies, property management companies that handle student rentals for people who just want to invest and they don't necessarily want to do the property management.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any specific to student rentals. Here in Kelowna, there's definitely property management companies that will take those on. And my opinion is that, when I went to college, is what they call it in the States, we lived in a big house. There was 8 girls there. Parties happen there. So I personally would suggest investing in more of a condo rental for students, because there's probably not going to be that much destruction in a condo. They're students, they're studying. The vacancy rate is so low in BC, especially as it is around the province. There's always going to be students there, so you can kind of pick and choose that high quality of tenant who is really just focused on their studies.
But the good thing about short-term rentals is they don't follow the RTA. It's a different set of rules for short-term rentals than it is for long-term rentals. I think that as far as I recall, I thought it fell under the Innkeepers Act.
Sorry, for student rentals or short-term rentals?
Student rentals.
There's no guidelines that I'm aware of that are different for student rentals than they are in the RTA.
Okay, so they all fall under the RTA. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm wrong. So I stand corrected.
Yeah, that's okay. So same lease agreements for students. I think we've rented a property to a student before and it was the same. And yeah, usually their parents are somewhat involved, so that's good. They're probably good for it. And like we said, there's always going to be students in these major urban centers that have universities, so I don't think vacancy is ever going to be an issue.
Oh, no, I was thinking of like a student rental house, kind of like a boarding house used to be, where, everybody has a room on it. They have a communal bathroom. There's a communal place where they do their laundry. There's a communal kitchen. And so I'm not sure if that falls under the RTA or if that falls under the Innkeepers Act. Okay.
I'm honestly not sure about that. Yeah. I'm not aware of the student housing.
Yeah. Anyway, the friends of mine who own a student housing property in Vancouver Island, their property sits at a separate house on the same lot in their primary residence, and so I think they kind of fell in between the cracks with the RTA, and so they can actually do what they want. Luckily, they're very ethical and they're very kind to the students, and they have a property that's in beautiful condition, and it's a really nice place. So if I were a student, I would love to live there. They also have young professionals who move in who are maybe coming down for contract work, or they're doing freelance work, and they don't want to rent an apartment. They don't want to spend all that money. They just need a room and an internet connection, a desk, and a kitchen to eat if they cook, and a bathroom, of course.
Yeah.
So so it works both.
Where on the island is that?
They're close to Mount Royal.
Mount Royal in Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's a good area.
Yeah, it's quite a good location. Anyway, I digress.
Cool. Okay. Where are we? $91 million over 3 years for a new pilot project that will provide financing incentives to encourage homeowners to develop new secondary suites on the property of their principal residence for long-term renters. More details haven't been announced, but in BC, there are areas where secondary suites are not allowed or unauthorized. Many of the suites in the province are unauthorized. Usually there's not a crackdown on those because the government knows that we need more housing. Yeah. I think it's positive to know that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. People can rent out their unauthorized suite just as easily as they can their authorized suite, and there's no difference in rental income. So it sounds like there's some initiatives to help incentivize people to keep creating those suites for secondary rentals and rental income, and also put more homes on the market.
It's a great idea. They actually grandfathered a lot of secondary suites in Calgary, and the house that I live in had an illegal secondary suite, and it wasn't zoned for suites. But then Calgary had the same housing issues, shortage of housing, and they realized if they closed all of those down, people would be out of a place to live, and that wouldn't work very well at all. So they made it easier for landlords to upgrade their secondary suites and legalize them. And so we were able to do it really quite easily. So that was great.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree. I think, for mortgage helpers, from an investment perspective, having that secondary suite authorized or unauthorized is important for many people. And it also allows investors to buy homes that maybe just have an unfinished basement and put in a suite, and you don't necessarily have to spend the extra amount of money to make it legal, which can be significant. So I think that's really positive to hear from the government. So there's a new income tested renters tax credit set to provide up to $400 a year in income tax credit for households with adjusted income up to $60,000.
That's not really much of an incentive, though, is it? If you're only making $60,000, you can get up to $400 as a tax.
Yeah,
honestly, I think it's a bit of poverty line.
I think it's probably a bit more of a publicity grab for that one. I wouldn't put too much value on that one so much. I agree with you. Then lastly, the property transfer incentive. So beginning January 1st, 2024, purchases of purpose-built rental buildings at least 10 years old that include at least 4 residential units will be exempt from the 2% property transfer tax that is applied to any transaction over $3 million.
That's great.
That is great. Purpose-built rentals, any development made with the intention of renting it out instead of
and that
selling
would make a difference. I think that's the next slide, though. I can only see the one about property transfer tax incentives. Maybe we could click to the next slide. Oh no.
Oh, sorry. That slide. I didn't write it down on the slide.
Yeah. But no, that's really a great incentive, though.
I think so. I think it's a really good incentive. It would apply to that building in Creston, our 23-unit building. So I don't think we discussed this, but we're actually under contract on that building now. We're selling it. Our strategy, as mentioned, is a buy and hold strategy, but we're planning on deploying capital elsewhere, a little bit closer to where we live in Kelowna. So it was listed for $3.25 million, 6.46 cap rate, and it sounds like, unfortunately, they won't be able to apply that exemption yet, because it sounds like it's coming in January of next year. But in the future, that will, I think, incentivize investors to kind of get more into the multifamily space, save some money. So zoning changes, faster permitting process. New BC government promises to introduce zoning changes and speed up the permitting process to generate more housing supply.
Okay.
Currently, yeah. I don't know what is it like in Alberta to get permitting?
Not as bad as other places, but it's still a long process.
Yeah, it is. We're in the process of subdividing, like I said, and many places in BC, many municipalities require multiple permits, applications spanning over different ministries and different processes, and it takes a long time. So this is apparently going to streamline the process and allow or eliminate the need for multiple applications. I think making it more efficient and cost effective is going to incentivize developers to build more homes, especially now with interest rates and supply chain issues. Developers need any incentive they can get, and I think this is a huge one.
That's great.
Moving on. So this one is also, I think, exceptional as well.
I'm just going to stop you even before you launch in, because for people who are from the prairie provinces, we're not going to know, who might not have heard of the Strata or rental pools. Maybe you could explain what those are first.
Sure thing. Yeah. So in BC, a lot of up to 15% of buildings, actually, I think there's a study done a couple years ago, have rental restrictions in their stratas. So there was, within those restrictions, there was a number of units in the building allowed to rent, sometimes as little as 3 units out of a 20+ unit building. So you had to go in the rental pool and you had to be on a wait list in order to be able to rent your unit, which obviously put a big crunch down on available rentals. So the Premier came in within weeks, abolished any of those restrictions. So no rental pools, every unit allowed to be rented. all age restrictions removed except for ages 55 plus. So yeah, I think that's a great.
That's very significant. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and they got it done right away. Usually how governments work, it takes months, sometimes years, but this was done within weeks. So yeah, love that. Market stats we can get into. I don't know if you can see that slide. From January 2023 to 2022, Northern BC actually had the smallest year-over-year drop at 1.6%. But that's keeping in mind Northern BC has the cheapest average price in the province. Average price is at around $372,000. Fraser Valley had the highest drop at 27.5.
Ouch.
Decrease. Yeah, that one hurts. The entire Okanagan saw an 11.3% decrease on average. However, those drops were as little as 5.9% in some of the key areas. Vancouver Island saw a smaller average dip at 6.9. Unit sales on average have decreased 50% across BC. Inventory has doubled, up about 100% from the low of market peak. So there's more supply, and demand has obviously softened, which is reflective in the price drops. However, if you do take out that 2021 anomaly year, we're still up from pre-pandemic levels.
Great.
So while average prices have dropped in most markets, year-over-year measures reflect the decline that occurred from the insanity of the market peak. In Kelowna, it was in March of 2022, and not necessarily from those previous years. So to be more specific, from 2018 to 2020, MLS average home prices in BC were around $800,000. They shot up over $1 million at the peak in March, and now they're back down to the high 1,800 or 800. So obviously we've seen a drop, but if you take out 2021, we're not in as bad a shape as many of the headlines make it out to be. As mentioned, inventory has gone up about 100%. Unit sales on average have decreased about 50%. That being said, lack of inventory is still a major issue. In my opinion, I think we'll see the rest of 2023 probably kind of level off. Prices are starting to balance out here in Kelowna. And then when rates go down again, potentially the first quarter of 2024, we'll see what happens. I think prices will start to creep back up again, personally.
Well, it's always the same, isn't it? If it's up, it's going to go down. If it's down, it's going to come up.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to predict, is it?
It's pretty simple. If you just simplify it right down, I think interest rates coming back down. There's still all that pent up demand. Like, people still need homes, and homes aren't being built at a fast enough rate. Inevitably, I think it's just going to continue to drop prices.
And it doesn't matter where you live. Most people want to own their own home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a dream of most people. You own a house. You've got a place to call your own, and that's a dream people have. So regardless of the housing prices, people will always want home ownership.
I agree. I personally have quite a few clients who've just kind of been sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what's going to happen with interest rates. Obviously, they've just shot up within the last year, and they've kind of been hesitating to purchase because they want to know what's going to happen to the market. I think that now is actually a wonderful time to be a buyer. You have way less competition. We're actually able to negotiate money off of the purchase price. Sellers are a little bit more reasonable now, and you have there's just more opportunity. So even if you're paying a higher interest rate, you're going to get a lower house price than you would have this time last year.
Kind of evens itself out then.
I think so. Yeah, I think it will for sure. And then you don't have as much competition as you would have last year, and potentially down the road as well. So now I think we're kind of in a sweet spot. Even though interest rates are high, a lot of people can't make it work, which is totally fair and understandable. But if you can, I think personally it's a good time to buy. So this just average rental rates, upward pressure on the rental market since the beginning of COVID due to lack of supply. Kelowna, we see about an average of $1,900 for a one bed and $2,400 for a 2-bed, although there's fluctuation depending on if it's, there are a lot of more luxury rentals in Kelowna, a lot of higher end homes that are going for more than that.
And those aren't crazy prices. I think those are probably.
I think that's also an average. Yes. Yeah, it isn't wild. No, it's not Vancouver prices for rentals. You see, like I said, some condos in the luxury space are going for higher than that, but then there's also some more affordable rentals. Lots of development is happening here in Kelowna. Lots of wood frame buildings that are going for a bit lower price point. This is just a graph to show average price by region. So yeah, it's continuing yo-yo on an escalator, continuing to go up, even with some dips in the market as we're in right now. So I'll just
back up a couple of slides. How much is the average housing cost for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom in Victoria and BC? We talked about Kelowna, and those were decent prices. What is the average price in
for
BC?
rentals?
Yeah.
I don't actually have that data. I think it's quite similar to Kelowna in the sense, maybe even a bit more. Or Victoria is more of a city, where Kelowna is a blossoming city, a small city. So I think they're probably around a similar price point. I don't have the actual data for that though.
Do you know what the rental prices are for? I mean, I imagine Vancouver's crazy, and Victoria would be crazy too.
Yeah, Vancouver's the highest market in the province, and I think it's over $3,000 easily for a 2-bed in Vancouver.
If you can find one.
If you can find one, yeah, if you can find one, exactly. So yeah, quick, I'll go through this. BC REA market forecast for 2023. So predicting that home sales will remain slow this year. Housing market typically tends to lead the business cycle, so we'll see what happens in that space. But recession tends to signal the start of a housing recovery the following year, and sees a strong bounce back. So good sign for 2024. Sales are forecasted to be low before rising next year. Overall levels of inventory still remain low. So while we're up massively from the craziness of last year, it's still historically we're at a low. Abrupt shift in market conditions saw prices fall during last year, but they're starting to stabilize. In Kelowna, we're definitely seeing prices stabilize, and monthly price recovery is expected later in the year. So speaking about Vancouver, just at a very high level, opportunities, obviously strong demand, limited supply, diversified economy, big tech scene there. Lots of natural resources, finance, growing population. Challenges, everyone knows high prices in Vancouver. It can be hard to make it work if you're trying to get in the market. Tight regulations, zoning restrictions, rental increase restrictions. So I don't know what your rental increase restrictions are.
We don't have any.
You don't have any. Okay. You win that round too.
No, and actually we were worried that they might happen in Alberta because they had taken place here in the 1980s, and there was a big public outcry because they were doing the reverse of what the government thought they were going to do. So a bunch of us wrote letters to the Minister of Service Alberta, Nate Glubish, and he wrote me back, and he said, we're not going to introduce or reintroduce cap rates for rentals because it didn't work in the 1980s. It had the opposite effect, so we're not doing it again. Mm-hmm. So you can increase the rent any price you want.
Yeah, well, that's great. Here in BC, we're capped at 2% per year. So yeah, unless you have high tenant turnover, which honestly we prefer, because then you can increase the rate to help out with that inflation. We're stuck at 2%.
That's kind of that is sort of tough, and that I think is tougher for BC than it is in Alberta because. Here I like to have long-term tenants in my properties because they don't get all beaten up, and you don't have that lag where you're not getting paid, or you're doing painting and repairs or whatever, and no one's renting your unit. So it's nice to kind of just keep somebody there long-term and continually raise the rent a little bit to keep up with inflation. Whereas if you want to keep up with inflation, they have to move out and then you have to reset. So
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm hoping enough people rally forces, enough landlords rally forces so that Ontario and BC landlords get treated more fairly.
Yeah, the PC Tenancy Act does lean towards in favor of tenants for sure. We've seen, honestly, it hasn't been a huge issue for us in our multifamilies. We've had a pretty high tenant turnover, just especially in Creston. Vernon is definitely more stable. Creston is a little bit more of a high turnover type town. People are coming in and out for work. So every time a tenant moved out, we would renovate that unit. So that's how we got up to those 18 units. And so that actually worked really well. And then we were able to raise the rent that way. So you can be creative in the way you do it. I listened to a podcast recently, 1-bedroom units are a little bit better for that turnover because people are probably going to be growing out of that if they're planning on having a family or expanding in some ways. So yeah, there's ways around it, but it's tough to raise that rent unless you have tenants moving out for sure.
Yeah, so you have to always stay on top of it and make sure that you're sort of jumping on it when people are moving out, and making sure your rental prices are going up enough that you can.
Yeah, but then there's properties I own. Well, actually, I just sold recently. I had owned 2 condos on the island. And I had amazing tenants that I was just like, you know what, I'm okay to not raise the rent on you. You guys are amazing tenants, 0 issues. And honestly, just, for that higher quality of life and less work, it made sense. I still factored into the numbers and I was happy to just have them stay. They can stay for as long as they want.
Peace of mind counts for a lot sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you have a new baby.
Yeah, who I just hear waking up. So if you hear crying, I apologize. Victoria, very similar to Vancouver, obviously a smaller market, but strong rental market, tons of outdoor recreation, historical architecture, international airport, challenges by the high price, limited supply, zoning restrictions, short-term rental regulations, and development costs can be high. So here's some other markets that I personally think have some opportunities. So Nanaimo, Courtenay Comox, Cowichan Valley, all in Vancouver Island. Bamfield is off of Vancouver Island, so you take a little ferry from Port Alberni to get there. I'll go a little more into that in the next slide. And then Penticton is kind of that sub-market in the Okanagan region, about an hour from Kelowna, hour and a half from Kelowna. So Nanaimo, growing city on Vancouver Island, the population of over 100,000, has proximity to Vancouver and Victoria, beautiful natural surroundings, growing economy, makes it an attractive option for real estate investment. Additionally, multifamily land has been consistently increasing there. So right now they're seeing land sell for $3 million an acre, apparently. Courtenay Comox, North Island, Vancouver Island. So relaxed, laid-back lifestyle, strong focus on outdoor recreation. Mount Washington Ski Mountain, the mountain I grew up learning to ski and snowboard, is only about 20 to 30 minutes away there, so that's a huge benefit. Excellent food and drink scene, lots of farm-to-table restaurants and breweries, and they've achieved some steady growth over the last few years. So the Cowichan Valley is where I grew up. It's central location on the island, an hour from Victoria, 40 minutes from Nanaimo. Pretty strong art scene, lots of outdoor recreation, growing economy, affordable housing market. And it actually has a wine country in Cowichan Valley. So not as many people know that, but the valley has Mediterranean-like climate, cool, wet winters, warm summers, warm, dry summers. So lots of popular wineries throughout.
So kind of smaller kind of cities. These are all cities, right?
Yeah, these are all smaller cities.
Smaller cities outside of the larger centers that are more reasonably priced, and they're still growing and they're still flourishing.
Exactly, yeah. So I think the major markets in BC, Vancouver, obviously, Victoria, and Kelowna is up and coming kind of into that category. So these are all smaller kind of markets that you can, you can invest in with probably some potential for growth and appreciation. And as well, they have a lot of other benefits to them as well, making people want to live there. Cowichan Valley, so that's where I bought my first property myself. It was a 1-bedroom condo back in 2017. It was $105,000. It was listed at $110,000. We offered $100,000. They countered at $105,000, and I really had to think about it, which is really funny to think about now. But that property ended up, being a great investment. It's probably worth about almost $300 now, maybe $275,000. Cash flowed a couple $100 a month since I bought it, and it's just been like a really great little investment. And then I bought another condo in the valley in Duncan. Same thing, bought it for $175,000. Just sold it recently for $290,000, and I bought it 2018. So
those are happy stories.
yeah, those were happy stories.
But you're talking about going from 100 to 105, and you're thinking my budget is 100 now. But if that's when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money. That's
and at the time,
$5,000, you're like, oh, how am I going to do it? It's tough.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's really funny to think about now. Thank God I didn't walk on that deal, and came through with it. But at the time it wasn't. It was just normal. Like it wasn't. It didn't feel that cheap, which is kind of funny to think about now.
When you look back on it,
Yeah. So then Banfield's really interesting town. It's supposed to be called the next Tofino. So land and home prices have gone up in the past few years. Lots of sandy beaches. It's a beautiful spot that I think people are flocking to and has seen some steady growth over the past few years, definitely on the smaller side. And then Penticton, coming back to the Okanagan, lakeside city, lots of cultural scenes, short-term rental restrictions are not as tight as they are in the major markets as of now. Who knows what's going to happen. And then close to Naramata, which is a big wine country in BC. So to Kelowna, my market, Kelowna, why Kelowna? Kelowna was named the fastest growing city in Canada recently with a 14% growth rate. Climate, mild 4-season climate, warm summers, relatively mild winters. The city receives more than 2,000 hours of sunshine annually, apparently. So
sunny Kelowna.
Sunny Kelowna, sunny dry heat, that desert heat. We're situated in the heart of Okanagan Valley, so lots of picturesque mountains, lakes, forests. We're located right on Okanagan Lake. I've been to the wineries.
I've gone on winery tours there, and they really are fantastic. You feel like you're going to a different country every time you go into a different winery.
They are, they are. It's like the Napa Valley of Canada, they say. They really do have some stunning wineries, and they're everywhere. Like we have probably 5 wineries within a 3-minute drive of where we live. Education. So lots of education opportunities, top rated elementary and secondary schools, as well as UBCO. International airport, which is expanding.
It's pretty small. It strikes me as being funny that it's an international airport. I've been there a number of times. I've got friends in Kelowna. A lot of them buy property in Kelowna.
Okay. Yeah.
For all the reasons that you mentioned here.
Yeah, there's a lot, definitely, but it is small, which is actually kind of nice when you need to fly out of there because there's never any lines. I guess I want it to expand, but I also don't. I love the size of it right now. Big White Ski Resort. So it was just named one of the top or the top family resort in Canada. It's within 45 minutes of downtown. They say you can ski and play golf on the same day here in Kelowna. Agriculture industry, obviously wine and fruit, but reports say that Kelowna may have the best climate to grow marijuana in Canada, so potential for that industry to grow. Side note. Short-term rental market, like we've spoken about, lots of people are kind of getting into the space here, just seeing how much people can make. And obviously there's a bit of a speculation on appreciation. People think home values are going to go up here, as do I. But in the short term, if you can't make it work cash flow wise, making it into a short-term rental is a good option. And then major development happening, lots of growth in West Kelowna, Vernon, the surrounding areas here. We're currently seeing, according to CMHC, 4,629 dwellings under construction currently, and 3,200 of those are apartments. So lots of pre-construction opportunities, affordable pre-construction, as well as lots of luxury. Like there is a lot of wealth coming into Kelowna, so a lot of developers are taking advantage of that and kind of building right on the lake, these beautiful luxury high-end properties. But there's from every spectrum, from low end to high end, lots of pre-development happening. So some good opportunities to get into the market if you want to wait till interest rates go down before you have to actually close on the property. And then there's about 10 short-term rental zone buildings in Kelowna. So like I mentioned, you either have, if it's a home, it has to be your primary residence, but if you buy into any of these short-term rental buildings, then you can rent it out short-term year-round. So we own one of those properties downtown Kelowna, and it does well. So that's an opportunity here. And here's just like a quick graph on the residential average prices. So we've seen it go up and then it's taken a dip, but it hasn't gone below pre-COVID levels. So single family benchmark price right now, as of last month, $971,300. So that's down 14% from last February. And only a few $1,000s, but only a few $1,000s lower from last month. So from January of this year. So we're seeing prices really level out. And actually in the townhome and condo market, prices have gone up this past month. So people are potentially moving into that lower asset class based on maybe potential affordability and interest rates. Townhome benchmark price, $740, and condo sitting just below $500. Townhome.
I had a friend who bought a condo in Kelowna thinking he was going to move into it because he originally from Edmonton, and he bought this condo knowing that he wanted to move there eventually. But in the meantime, he rented it out. And so he never did end up living in the condo. He ended up renting it out. And then when he did move to Kelowna, he bought a house, sold the condo, and paid the house off with what he made from the condo. So it really worked out well for him.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're seeing, there's a lot of, Did he buy it pre-construction? Was it new when he bought it?
It was new, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of pre-construction opportunities. I have a lot of clients wanting to get into that space for that reason. You can put 10 to 20% down now, but not have to qualify for your loan until it's completed. So 2 to 4 years out. And typically we see that those appreciate by then at that point as well. So you can either do what he did, you can sell it, you can assign it, or you can move into it or rent it out as a short-term rental.
Lots of options.
Lots of options. Absorption rate here, 16%. We're creeping into the balanced market, so about 8.3 months of inventory. So to summarize the outlook in BC, have we reached the cyclical bottom? A lot of people think we have, or we're nearing it. So the chief economist of BC REA says what we've seen throughout history is that year after recession, the home sales in the province rise anywhere between 25 and 40%. Obviously, a lot of that depends on interest rates coming down, but there is opportunity for a lot of growth in 2024, which I think we're going to see a strong market in 2024.
Yeah, great.
And then finally, in summary, BC has its challenges, as we know and talked about, but it does remain one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I believe that real estate prices will continue to rise, creating wealth for investors in BC.
As they have for you.
As they have for us. Exactly.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much for that presentation.
Yeah.
And parting words, if people want to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you, Emily?
Sure. Let me just put I think I have my info up here. So Yeah, you can reach me at emily.zurrer@century21.ca. That's my email. Reach out anytime. On Instagram, I'm Emily Zurrer Real Estate. Facebook, Emily Zurrer Real Estate. And then emilyzurrer.com is my website.
Yes, and it really helps to have a real estate agent who is also an investor and who has a really wide range of investing experience, which Emily does at such a young age. So good for you. And thank you very much for all of that information. It was a wealth of information, and great to see those stats on BC. Good to see BC doing well and continuing to do well throughout history. There are diehard people who won't live anywhere else. Other than
Yeah.
Probably, I can't imagine you moving to Alberta or Saskatchewan or Winnipeg or Ontario.
We'll never say never. I don't think so. But yeah, I think I might be a BC girl for life.
Okay,
So
good stuff.
We'll
Thanks
have
so much
to get you out here.
Yes.
We'll have to get you out here to visit.
Yes. Well, I'll come.
Okay,
I-
deal.
I'll
We'll hit up
visit
some
sometime.
wineries.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Nelda. I appreciate it.